Good evening. Motzi Shabbat. Welcome. Shavua Tov, as we say in Israel, a good week. It's been a sweet Shabbat with a lot of friends and family. And it's also a sweet time to sit alone in one study and contemplate what's important in this world. Continuing our series, we're up to the last two parts of our Hanukkah series. And tonight is the seventh candle. And I entitled this unplug to plug in, right? Unplug to plug in, meaning, of course, that we need a solution to our social revolution. In other words, what's the point? What are we know what we're revolting against. We know, we've talked about that for week after week. The social segregation that has been imposed on society is unprecedented in the modern age. Certainly as an American, it is. That the segregation is no longer about your skin color. It's about what you believe in God or not in God. Are you left? Are you right? Are you woke? Are you unwoke? Are you asleep? All these categories, where did they come from? What do they mean? And why are they driving wedges between people? Because this seems to be at the heart of the problem in Hanukkah. The Jewish people were a simple agrarian culture living in this land with their temple, with their God, with their Torah. And the Greeks came in under the great Alexander, and he was benevolent to a degree. But once he was knocked out, we already learned this, that the Egyptian and Syrian branches of his kingdom came in and started to exact what most tyrants do, is taxes and control social life and impose their will upon others, especially the people who believed in the Torah. Because the people believe in the Torah, you cannot manipulate them the same way. I'm not saying you can't, but I'm saying that there is a clear distinction between a person who has a strong belief system in God and what he will believe or not believe, and what pablum of the press he will believe, what printed ideas will enter his mind, and what will pass through, what won't pass through the filter of the sages. The filter of the sages are the thousands of pages of Talmud that stand behind us, and the oral law and the written law, and the practice of those things create a filter for separating good and evil in all human endeavor. And so, but we have this new social coercion today. I heard maybe the first time, maybe not the first time, but it was very clear and strong. It's funny. I'm laughing, but it's not really funny. But I was told that the moment I mention God in a conversation, people turn off their mind. They're not interested. My words no longer have weight. The heart that I hope is in my words doesn't matter. Cancel. Erase. No existence. No presence. No voice. You mention the word God, you're no longer, as I was told, relevant to this discussion. Now, I've heard people that use, religious talk in a way that isolates them and separates them from a particular group of people. But just the idea that you can't mention God in a conversation without being edited, without being demeaned, without being separated and isolated from a group, where are we going? How far does that go? There's a social credit system in China. Is that going to be part of the thing now, that where you're going to be reported if you mention God, or if you say God has more power than the Communist Party, or that the church is more important, or the temple is more important? Here in Israel, we're not have too many problems with churches, but the Vatican's still alive and well in Israel, as are a few other groups. But truly, how far does it go? How far does it go before we decide that it's unbearable? The insult, the shame. Now, I'm a guy who likes to smile and laugh, tell a joke. So, I didn't take it too hard. And if people don't want to listen to me, that's fine. Because who says anyone has to listen to me? Or to anyone else for that matter. And if you have parameters that tell you, no, this guy's religious, look at his beard, then I can't talk to him. Well, I've seen people in the boxing ring with a bigger beard than mine. You know, they're right there in the NFL, anywhere. But really, this social segregation is a political tool of a higher master. Understand that this is not simple, that this is not exactly what you see. Okay, so, you know, it's something that, well, it's something that each person has to deal with individually. And how do we deal with individually? Well, is, of course, also a set of choices. You can choose to be insulted or can choose not to be insulted. You could choose to say, well, I'm not going to talk to those people anymore. You could say, well, maybe I'll just sit there and talk about what they want to talk about and not take a extreme religious position or go to defend myself. Because oftentimes when we defend ourselves, we just dig a hole. It's harder to get out of, especially when it comes to God. This is what I believe. It's a belief system. You have your system, I have mine, and each of you have yours. But I don't want to lose my personal connection to you over a belief system, because you're a human and I'm a human. We're part of the same experiment. We're part of the same family on this planet. And the fact that you exist is more important to me than what you believe. The fact that you're a sentient being. The fact that you care or don't care about life. That's where it's important. What you believe and how you observe your religious beliefs and how you express and define the parameters of your system, that's personal. What's not personal is when people attack each other's ability to communicate, when they segregate socially, when they place a moral taboo or a social taboo on a person because they believe a certain way, when they drive a person into isolation because they don't like what they believe, and they cut them off and they interrupt them, and they use name calling, and they make jokes and heckles and all kinds of fun stuff that are just designed only to obfuscate and to take our mind off the point. And the point here on Hanukkah is, who are we fighting for? And what are we fighting for? And do we really need to fight here in 2022, almost 23? What are we fighting for here? Is it the fight against inflation, the war on drugs, the war on immigration, the war, it's always the war metaphor that should make a light go off in our head. Wait a minute. Is this a war that was created by a tyrant? Or was this a war created to create profit? Or both? And so, I kind of watched these discussions, I let it roll. I was quiet. I sat quietly. I listened to the other people. I let them talk. And they went on and arguing about tiny aspects within the general frame of, does God exist or not? And for me, it's not a question. For me, it's a proven fact in my life. So many things, so many moments of divine inspiration and divine intercession, where I've seen the help of some kind of, supernatural power enter into my life and fix things, that I cannot claim credit for anything. But I certainly would be a fool not to believe when I first told God years ago, I'll follow you, but I need signs. I need direction. I need guidance. I need to know you're here. I need to know what you want me to do. And it's very clear. If you're a parent and you have a child, you can't expect something of your child without telling him first what you want him to do. So if you break your life down into little moments of, well, what do I do now? And you ask your Creator, eventually He's going to reveal Himself in your heart, and you're going to know what you're supposed to do. And you'll do it with joy. And you'll be a happy person. And what other people think won't really matter too much. It matters only because I care about people, but not from a place of concern about what they think or feel about me. So when we make this choice about giving my life to Hashem, it's really a moment-by-moment relationship, just like every other relationship. And as everybody who's been married knows, you have to tell your spouse you love them every chance you get, not just on your anniversary day or when something nice happens. And so in the context of Hanukkah and this internecine war between Jewish brothers, because the Greeks want to separate us. They want us to be at strife with each other because that takes the war off their hands. They want there to be conflict over immaterial things, ideas, because that takes them away from the real issue of, are we functioning as a healthy, positive, growing, constructive nation, or are we just going in circles? So the upshot of all of this is a statement I wrote here in my notes that the other side, which is really, it's a Kabbalistic term, the tzad acher, the dark side. It has many names. And a lot of people who aren't so religious won't even cop into the terminology. In Kabbalah, it's a very real thing. And it's really a conspiracy from a divine source. But the conspiracy is always pushing us into the place of making a choice. And the choice, as we learned last time, the choice is always about loyalty. What are we really loyal to? Because we could speak about our loyalty all we want, but the real loyalty only comes out in facts, in actions. And so the push is always into pushing our position. Are we going with this opinion or that opinion, with the masses or with the few, with the rabbis or with the politicians? And it's hard for us to imagine a society that's run by rabbis. You wouldn't like to live there, maybe. Well, but the society that's run by politicians, I'm not sure I like that too much either. But the point is that the other side has no power to really destroy us. We need to know that. As long as we have a connection to the Creator, we cannot be pushed too far. What the other side wants is us to fight each other. When he can get us to fight each other, he's already won his battle. He could sit down and wash his hands. Because once he's got human beings fighting each other, the conspiracy it loses control. It's like a crowd. You ever see a crowd? They're upset about something, but they're not ready to riot and commit acts of violence. And I've seen crowds. And a lot of crowds will gather and they'll throw things at each other and they'll scream and curse and everything. But they won't actually get to the point of physical violence. But then there's a point where it gets to physical violence and then the thing turns into a tidal wave. Well, you see, that's exactly what we're talking about here, is that right now we're in the stage of the conflict, of the revolution of a true Jewish nation, a truly Jewish nation. We're in a revolution of self-discovery of who we really are. And that's what Hanukkah demands of us. Who are you really for? Are you for the person that you believe will give you more perks at the end of the year? Or are you for the person that stands for an eternal value system that cannot be dismantled by human endeavor? Now, it can be tried, of course, and it's been tried many times. But when you're a master, as any master knows, any boss knows, if you're having control issues with the workroom, with the workforce, what do? Well, you set one side against the other, and that weakens both sides. And that's essentially what's happened in the ancient Hanukkah story, and I believe it's still happening today. Because when brothers and sisters no longer talk to each other because of politics, or because of vaccinations, or because of land issues, or because of how terrorists should be treated, when people are split at the family level, the people that I was born with, the people that I grew up with, the people that I love, suddenly don't want to talk to me because of a position I might take on an issue, that shows you that something's way out of balance. That our personal connections have become so weak. And this public connection, which is really what it is, it's the individual's relationship to the collective, that becomes essential, as opposed to my individual connections that are everyday and ongoing. When that happens, the Rambam says, when a society goes crazy, pick up your bags and move to the desert and live alone. Now, I asked myself, the Rambam was a person we can't even imagine the amount of encyclopedic knowledge he had, the awe that he had of the Creator, the connection he had to the Creator. And if you look at his works and you look at the way he wrote and you look at it's just astounding. The Rambam wasn't just giving us a statement, if people go crazy, go pitch a tent in the desert. He's not the type of person that would give you an advice like that unless he's either really means it or he expects you to interpret it. Now, Rabbi Nachman says, if you live in a society where everybody goes crazy, mark your forehead so that you'll know you're in a society that everybody's crazy. Because you'll be crazy too. If everybody's crazy, it's no longer crazy. Understand? It's the norm. And it's a new norm, right? The new normal. Well, when the new normal is everybody's crazy, no one's going to admit here that the world's crazy now. But if you look at the individual isolated events that are going on all around us, and the national events, and the crimes, and all the conditions that people are dealing with, it looks pretty crazy. So we could put a little mark on the forehead, a little tough. Adam got, Cain got the tough on his forehead to remind the animals that he's not an animal, don't eat him. Right? That was the sign. It was a protection sign, the Zohar says, to protect Cain from being eaten by the animals, because he was really not an animal. He was a human being, but he committed murder, so he needed protection from the wild kingdom. Now, so what do we do with this advice of the Rambam? We're really going to go out in the desert because everybody's crazy in New York? I mean, like, what desert are you going to go to? New Jersey? It's not a desert out there. How far are you going to have to go to find a desert? What are you going to do in the desert? How are you going to plug in your iPhone? You know what? It doesn't feel like a real advice for our society. Maybe back in the day when he lived in Egypt, a couple blocks down, the desert begins, and you can still carry water out by bucket every day. I don't know. You could go camping. Now, people have taken up a kind of I guess they're called the people that collect stuff in case of D-Day, in case of the Destruction Day. That there's a name for it. There's a couple of names for it, but the people that dig bunkers and cabins in the woods and isolate from society. That's not a bad idea, except if you have responsibilities to other people who can't do it. Because we're not allowed to break our responsibility. If you're a father or you're a mother, then it's going to be a really tough decision to uproot your children's lives and to go live in a cabin in the forest because everybody else is driving you crazy about what they want you to do in the name of politics. Even if they call it the name of health, it's really health politics. And so on and so forth. In Israel, it's a little more complicated because we have the whole Palestinian issue. But I think let's think a little bit outside the box with the Rambam was presenting this idea. Maybe there's a figurative desert that we can move into. A desert of self-preservation. A desert where we unplug to plug in. In other words, I don't need to get every news feed. I need very basic high headlines. I don't need to hear what everybody's doing on social media. I don't need to hear who's up and who's down and who's fallen, who's ashamed and who's praised. What do I need this information for? I need the basic information I need to know is how I need to serve God today. And that might mean going to work, and it might mean staying home. I've stayed home before because there's terrorist activity on the highway out here. And sometimes, you got to pray just before you leave your house to even know if I should leave my house. That's a reality out here, but okay. I imagine it's a reality in Manhattan too, if I want to go outside at a certain time in a certain place, from what I've heard lately, from the crime reports in a lot of big cities in the States. But think about it. The idea of a isolation from the global quality of our lives. In other words, to be more discerning about the information that we receive, to be more selective about the people we speak with, to be more careful about what we eat and what we drink and what we read and what we turn on. Maybe that's what Hashem wants. Maybe that's the isolation. Maybe that's the Shangri-La in the desert. To find our own voice, to find our own truth. Now, a few years ago, I was invited to a political meeting. It was a certain party, and they had an agenda, of course, and part of their agenda was to invite me and to get me into the story. And I went there, and I didn't know anything really. I just knew, of course, I knew a little bit about the party, but somebody at the party, asked me, "What do you think about our platform?" I said, "Well, I'm just here to learn." "Well, don't you support us?" "Well, I might support you. I really might, but I need to learn more about your platform and the other platforms before I can decide on where I'm going to put my loyalty." And the guy looked at me like I was a traitor and wouldn't look at me the rest of the night. And like, what did I say? All I said was I wanted to gather information before I make a decision. That offended him. That sent him running away from me. And I asked myself, wait a minute, this person expects me to drop my own selection process, my own personal critical skills, abilities, because he's got a nice suit and a nice car and a nice, pair of shoes. Is that freedom? Is that democracy? What is that? It sounds like another form of social coercion. Decide now or you can't. Like you go into a store and they tell you have to buy today or the sale is over. Oh, really? The warehouse is full of items you need to sell. Well, it's over today. I can't decide. I have to make a pressured purchase. Well, that's when you know that it's not coming from a good place. When people try to pressure you into anything. Because they're taking away your cognitive decision-making process. That's exactly what the Greeks wanted and what the Syrians who took over from the Greeks wanted. And the Egyptians, because Pharaoh his army went in the ocean. They came back a few generations later, And because when you can decide for somebody what they believe or think, you own them. And there's no person there anymore. And you diminish them. And this is true in education, especially in children, where if you don't let your child choose a large array of the questions of life, then he's going to feel put down. He's going to feel isolated. He's going to feel weak. Because dad doesn't let me decide what I want to eat for dinner. Or how much I need to eat. Et cetera, et cetera. You know what I'm talking about. So it seems to me that this is the real advice right now, is to find that place that we can be alone with ourselves and with our Creator, to learn to think deeper, longer, slower, and to weigh things better before we make any decisions. I'm constantly getting, little videos, and I don't even know if they're true or not. And I send them out to people I trust, and I always get back, no, it's not true, it's fake news, it's doctored, it's photoshopped. And I'm like, oh, I'm relieved, Because if they were true, everything that you're getting, wow, then it really is time to head out to the desert. But because the golden mean, the golden mean is this idea of the center of all issues. It doesn't mean you're sitting on a fence, not making choices, hiding by not choosing. No, the golden means is we take each and every individual question into account, and we weigh it ourselves, and we develop our minds and our free choice. And we bring God into the access of truth. In other words, when I hear a question, I want to know what God thinks. He'd say, Avraham, you can't know what God thinks. I said, well, why do I learn the Torah then? I have these thousands of laws that are supposed to guide my thinking through the maze of human experience. What's the point? Well, the point is to find some truth, some absolute truth. Well, there is no absolute truth. That automatically, you bring up absolute truth. People just, they turn off their brain. They don't want to hear from you. But there is an absolute truth for every single question, because God is involved in every question, and he cares about every question in our lives. Just like you care about your children. You care about what they do. You want to know what their day was like. And Rabbi Nachman comes along after all these thousands of years and says, talk to God. Tell him about your day. How was your day? What was up? What was down? What worked? What didn't work? God wants to hear from us. Because just like any parent, you love your kids. You want to hear what they're doing. And when you do that, you develop this interconnection where he's going to answer you when you need to know things. He's going to answer you when you get to that point of a question to decide, do I go with the Greeks or the Syrians or the Egyptians or the Jordanians or the Lebanese? Well, there's 25 different Lebanese groups. Okay, let's too complicated. What about Putin? What do I do with all these issues that are being blasted over the airwaves? Well, that's where I would go to the Rambam and head out to the desert. Turn off the news. Read a little bit, get what you need just for your life. And then head out to the desert, head out to your sacred space alone with Hashem. And you will find your true voice, the true voice of the creation in your soul. And you will be happy. And you will be able to look at the world from a different place altogether. And your life will get better and better. Promise. And that's the redemption we're all hoping for on an individual level, is that individual connection to Hashem. And when it collects together into en masse, into a real critical mass of people, humanity is going to change. Now, in the past, God has taken our disunity and turned it into war. Said, you guys don't want to get along? Well, I'll give you a new way to get along. I'm going to attack, I'm going to send the enemy against you. And this is the classic pattern throughout the entire 24 books of the Bible. That the Jews don't get along, and so God sends an attack from this tribe or that tribe or this tribe, and in order to force them, militarily at least, to work together. Because when we work together as Jews, we're a force that cannot be discounted. Because we have a creator behind us that has vested interest in our success, because our success is his success, just like in the Hanukkah story. So may we see the victory of truth and righteousness and justice and fairness and kindness and compassion soon in our days. And so hopefully there'll be so much good behavior in the planet that we won't be needing all this news and all this bad talk about people, and start hearing some good things. God bless you all. Hanukkah Sameach.